6, 7, 8 months I'd even like remotely shut off. And we just went to San Diego, took the kids for 5 days, and it was the first time I'd tried to shut off, and I had an emotional breakdown. I tell my wife, I think last year was my year of like figuring out my own stuff and my own life and how to work through that as an entrepreneur. Of like, I almost feel embarrassed to say at 34, I really hadn't had it hard.
Blake Harber, man. Dude, first of all, I love you, brother. I'm so excited to get to like hit record and like have a long form conversation with you, because we've been in a peer group together for the past year. I've gotten to know you really well through that and respect you more and more all the time. But then also you do this kind of building in public thing on LinkedIn. And so I think I'm not alone in feeling like I get to follow the Blake Harber story and journey. And you're uniquely raw, personal, open, which we'll get into. And I just want to let you know I really appreciate. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm looking forward to peeling back the curtain a little bit and getting to know your story.
Oh, thanks, Chase. I appreciate it. I hope you know I consider you such a great mentor, and I don't think I'd be doing what I'm doing now without you. So excited to be here.
Thanks, dude. Thanks for saying that. All right. Well, let's give listeners, let's assume maybe they don't follow you or building in public. Maybe give a quick, before we get into your backstory and a variety of topics you and I talked about getting into today, give us just a snapshot today. So you run Routine Holdings is what you call your holding company. It's almost like a micro family office. You do a bunch of consulting. Maybe just quick 60-second snapshot of your world today.
Yeah. So, about coming up on 3 years ago, left the corporate world and ended up building a consulting business, helping early stage, typically SaaS founders build repeatability on the go-to-market side. That's my whole background and career. So we kind of stumbled into that, and that transpired into some great cash flow that allowed us to start to allocate, us meaning my wife and I, some capital across a few different businesses. And we have since acquired 2 businesses. One is a vending machine route, was our first acquisition. And then the second business we bought is a 38-year-old electronics distribution company called Appleton Electronics. So we're coming up on 2 years of ownership on our stock and snack vending, and the second business about 18 months in on Appleton Electronics Group.
I love it. I love the diversity. Like, first of all, I'm sure 10 years ago, you'd be shocked to hear you're running a vending machine route.
That's for sure.
Like an electronic distribution company. It couldn't get more eclectic than that.
Yep.
All right. Well, we'll get into that. So I've actually never heard this story. What got you into tech in the first place? How did you find you've worked at some of at least Utah's, but truly like some of the best tech companies in the world. Lucid, HireVue. HireVue is an incredible Utah success story. What got you started into tech, and how did you make your way into sales?
Yeah, I'll go way back. My childhood. My father was an entrepreneur. He owns a construction business. Has since retired. Ironically, a construction business I probably could have and should have bought at some point through my acquisition.
Yeah.
They have since exited that, but I think like being young and having access to tractors and being 10 years old and understanding how to operate tractors, I started Blake's Tractor Service, which felt like the normal thing to do at 10 years old.
I didn't know this about you.
Yes, I didn't want to like mow lawns like my friends. I was like, I can make way more money doing tractor business, and I grew up in Southern California, and it gave me a chance to. I recognize this huge gap in the market, which was there's huge fire hazards in Southern California. So during the summer, if you don't plow your weeds in your backyard, you're going to get a fine from the city. And then the city sends out some guy in his tractor, and he discs your field and charges you $65 an hour as an operator and $120 an hour for the tractor. And I thought, oh, cool, I'll go undercut the city. Like my dad has a tractor, I know how to do it. And so I got deep voice at 12, so I can make cold calls. That wasn't planned; it just happened that way.
Had deep, sultry.
Always had the deep. Yep. So I'll never forget. I called had an inbound call because I used to do direct mail. Well, direct mail in the old school, I'd walk door to door and hang up flyers with people that had property. And they came inbound, and I talked to them on the phone and set the meeting. And then my mom had to drive me and my tractor to do the job. And I showed up and they're like, well, where's Blake? And I'm like, I'm Blake. And this 12-year-old kid. And anyways, ended up scaling a tractor business and sold that at 18 years old. I did that for 6 years, made killer money as a 16-year-old.
How did I not know this about you? Because I knew you grew up in California, but I didn't picture you on tractors.
No, the tractor boy through and through.
Really?
Yeah, I think that was like my introduction into entrepreneurship, sales. I mean, I was working deals at the city. I would go get the city list of who they were going to send fines to, and they were willing to give it to me because they didn't want to deal with it themselves. It was like a distraction. They just had to do it. And so I was like, cool, the city's willing to give it to me. I made friends with the local associations and got connected to who sends the fines out, and they'd send me their list, and I just cold call them and knock doors.
Do you think that's still a decent business today? Like, is someone in Southern California doing exactly what you were doing?
Absolutely. Still exists. It's very like a heavy summer, spring and summer, but man, you can make some great money doing it. And I would, on weekends, I'd do 2 or 3 jobs on a Saturday, and about an acre is probably $200 or $300. And your option is get the fine from the city and pay the $200 or $300, or
that's
just
wild. Yeah.
Have Blake do it. And again, 12-year-old, it's an absolute no-brainer.
Man, so not only did you taste like the fulfillment of entrepreneurship, but also an exit, having the chance to sell. And I'm sure it wasn't like a multi-million-dollar exit, but it sounds like it was more than just selling it to your brother for $100.
That's right. I sold it to a competitor. My parents, of course, helped me get the deal done. I think we sold it for like $25,000.
Cool.
And at 18, I was stoked. It's a big deal. And so I didn't understand the back, looking at a book of business and understand the revenue behind it, but like at least getting a taste of that helped pay for a hell of a lot of things in the next couple of years of my life. And that then transpired into, went on a LDS mission, came home. My wife and I met out there. We got married about 6 months or about 18 months after that, and we're pregnant like immediately. And at this point, we were living in California. I'd started a digital marketing agency. I called it a digital marketing agency. It actually wasn't that at all. It was like I was putting digital billboards on the form of a TV in local, like high foot traffic areas, and then I was selling advertising on those. So I would go build a digital menu board before digital menu boards were a thing.
Interesting.
And then we'd sell the restaurant or the gym 80% of the space, or sorry, they'd get 20% of the space and allow us to resell 80% of the space.
Got it.
So built a recurring revenue model on a small business like this. And honestly, I just stole the idea from someone else that I saw do, and I was like, I could do that way better. And wasn't anything unique, but it was a great business. It was recurring revenue. I'd go to local fairs and just stop by booth to booth, knocking doors, selling advertising. And I did that for about 2 years, and then sold that to a much bigger competitor. That was a better exit. Nothing life changing, but I think it was just north of $100,000 at 21, 22. And that was great for us. It had a chance for my wife and I to kind of like look at options and say, okay, what do we want to do here? And I knew everything I'd been reading and learning was tech related or SaaS related specifically, at least in my understanding. And I thought, okay, I want to get into SaaS, but we don't go to the Bay Area. And so we found Salt Lake to kind of be an up and coming tech scene, and thought, let's go to Salt Lake. Like her family had moved from Wyoming to Logan, and this was a chance for us to come up here, spread our wings a little bit. And I had no context on Salt Lake or tech, and I just did what I knew best and came up and started knocking doors on SaaS companies, and just showed up with resume in hand, didn't know anyone to be looking for, and ended up at a company called HireVue. Luckily, they took a shot on me early days. Mark Newman, love the guy, still very close friends with him, still work very closely with him at his new company. But had a chance to help build out their inside sales team, went from about 3 to 30 million in 2 years. And then they had a pretty big exit to private equity after that. Then joined a company called Lucid early on. They were also about $3 million of revenue when I joined them, all product led. Hadn't built like a go-to-market team on top of that.
You joined Lucid when they were $3 million in revenue.
Yeah, they were really small.
Early days.
Yeah, probably 50, 60 employees, and they just started to hire sales reps. They were probably about 4 or 5 reps when I joined, and trying to figure out how do we build this go-to-market engine on top of the product-led motion. And I always joke I should have actually just been in venture capital because I probably could have made a hell of a lot more money investing in the right companies.
Yeah, if you wrote a check at the time that you joined as an employee.
Exactly. I'd be done. So yeah, I had a chance to scale their go-to-market team and just built a great network there. Spent 4 years there, went to 100 million in 4 years. And then I'm an early stage guy. I'm like $100 million business isn't as interesting to me. And so ended up leaving there and joining a company called Workstream based in Palo Alto. The local Peterson Ventures team, got to know them all through HireVue and Lucid days. And they'd introduced me to Workstream and the founder there, about 400K of revenue when I joined, just trying to figure out go to market, all founder led, hadn't, built a sales team around it or anything. And, the founder wanted to build a sales team here in Salt Lake. And, I ended up building that team from the ground up. My first couple of hires, we were working out of the camping trailer next to the house and, figuring out how to take this applicant tracking system to market and across 7 verticals, and ended up kind of really honing in and verticalizing the business. And we grew to about 20 million in 2 years and scaled a pretty good sized sales org here in Salt Lake. And after about 2 years, we raised a $100 million Series B and Founders Fund, ended up joining our board, and Bond and Co2, some great VCs. And honestly, I think I burnt out is what it comes down to. I got 4 young kids and a wife, and luckily I'm still married, and my kids still know I exist at this point. I don't know if they did when I left 2.5 years ago. And I remember, I'll never forget, I went to tuck my son in, who was 8 at the time. And I remember just trying to have a conversation with him one night, and it was like I was so emotionally disconnected and didn't know like him and what was going on in his life. And I thought, like, what, I would rather work at Costco at this point. Like, nothing against Costco, great company, but like I would, if that meant I could like come home from a job, shut off, and like work on being present. Like I have such a short time where they're in my home, they care about me, they still want to hang out with me, kind of thing. And if I don't optimize for that now, I'm going to wake up and they'll be 20 and I will desperately regret it. And so,
well, it's interesting because like I've heard, running a business can be similar, right? It's all encompassing. But there's something really, there's something about tech and early stage high growth tech that can be almost as all encompassing. And kind of what was it for you? Like, was it the long hours? Was it the pressure? What was it that had you so distracted and pulled away from, what really mattered to you?
I think what I've learned about myself is I'm a people pleaser, and I will go to extreme lengths to make my CEO happy. That's what it comes down to. And I think like that's been really hard for me to work through in general, and even as an entrepreneur, right? Like it's similar challenges, but there's a joke. My most recent founder, they're all from Singapore, and in Singapore, it's a 996 rule. You work 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week, and like that was just the norm, and that became my norm very quickly to do that. And when you're raising that kind of capital, there's kind of this unseen expectation. I don't just report to my CEO. I've now got Kotu and Bond and Jay Simons and like people that. A founder, like Founders Fund, like Keith Boys is a damn intimidating guy. Founder of PayPal. Like I don't want to. The last thing I want to do is show up and tell them we're missing numbers as a sales leader. And so,
well, and you're always fundraising, and there's always benchmarks you have to hit to unlock the next round, and so there's just this constant sprint. You're just sprinting from 1 mile marker to the next mile marker, and that can just be exhausting.
Yeah, living really 1 month at a time. And I think that there's this element of recognizing that, I was turning 30 at the time, and it was like, man, what am I doing with all this? Like, what's an actual outcome here for me? And as I started to get to know other founders and realities of venture-backed startups and liquidity events and what those actually look like, I'm thinking, damn, like I I've had better outcomes with some of my cells of my small business, and I have opportunities to probably just go build something on my own over time. And I wasn't necessarily thinking that at the time, but I just knew that if I'm going to be carrying this weight and stress, I at least want my boss to maybe be my wife, and we could have a conversation or something about it, as opposed to some CEO that I am drawing the CEO lottery and hope I just get a good one.
Yeah. I think about that lunch you and I had like 2 or 3 years ago downtown. You remember that?
Yep.
There was another tech founder that joined us for lunch. I can't remember who was with us, but it was like a 60 to 90 minute just like venting session on the kind of allure of tech.
Yeah.
And the promises, sometimes like implicit and unspoken promises of RSUs and equity and options. And we were talking a lot about like the arrival fallacy of, you're kind of telling yourself, you're telling your partner, your family, this is a sacrifice that we're making.
Yeah.
We're on a rocket ship. This is kind of a once in a lifetime career opportunity. We're taking this to the moon. The metrics are good. We've raised capital from some of the best investors. The 996, I hadn't heard that. The 60-hour work weeks, like this is temporary and it's all going to pay off.
Right.
And in the heyday of tech, like oftentimes that was true. You join a great company and everyone kind of knew someone in Silicon Valley who had made it big and was able to pay cash for a home and retire for either for life or for several years, and just by being an early member of a startup team. But then over the past several years, as valuations have come down, as kind of tech has had to reset, a lot of folks got to the end of that mile marker with these RSUs that in their mind were worth millions, and weren't. And they were worth something, but probably not worth all of that sacrifice leading up to that moment. And I remember we were just kind of talking about this. This was, I think, pre-acquisition on your side. And yeah, I think tech really went through a bit of a moment as valuations came down, as like all of these employees who had been sacrificing a decade of their career weren't seeing the outcomes that they were kind of thinking were almost inevitable.
I think I'm a classic example of I rode the wave. I rode the good wave. I mean, I talked to so many friends that are still in tech, and I feel like the month I left was the year evaluations, or the month started to tank, like truly.
And timing, Blake. I've learned of this.
That's right. I don't know if that's like a good or a bad thing, because I'm still a liquid on stuff. But I rode the good years for sure, and I'm grateful for that. I'm not one of the lucky ones though that sold that year. Right. I had the stock options. Luckily, I didn't have RSUs that are double triggered. I have plenty of friends that have been 8 years at a company, double trigger RSUs, and they're going to leave it all on the table. And it's like, what, don't get me wrong. I'm downplaying the experience I had. I wouldn't be doing what I am today without that experience. But yeah, I saw millions of dollars in my eyes for a long time of some liquidity event. And aside from HireVue, the two big ones haven't had any liquidity events. So we'll see where that goes.
Interesting. All right. So you didn't immediately jump in and get back into business ownership. You started consulting. What were you primarily consulting around? I mean, you had been in the fun, for all we've hated on tech, I think let's say one thing. The energy of the early days is something I actually miss a lot. I don't know if you feel the same thing, of just the energy of being a part of what feels like a rocket ship can be infectious. And that's part of why you willingly show up and work 60-hour work weeks. And so I'm sure you were on this kind of quote unquote ground floor of some burgeoning tech startups, and you learn a lot in that condensed period of high growth. Scaling. What were you primarily consulting around, and what were some of the greater needs that had you busy in your consulting practice?
So when I started, I got pulled into consulting. I actually planned on just saying, okay, we're going to take 6 months off, spend time, reconnect with my kids, get to learn who they actually are, connect with my wife. Like, haven't emotionally been present for a long time, and within about 3 months, got pulled into some consulting opportunities and recognized I could scratch that itch actually from but see it across a few different companies. I feel like that's something I appreciated in my career, been able to see 3 good startups. Frankly, I didn't know what bad looked like. And that is a unique challenge to have because everyone has the opposite experience. And then here I am at 30, and this will dovetail into my ETA stuff drastically in my midlife crisis, probably from all this. But I had such good runs of making good bets on good companies. I only know what good look like. So it was kind of this exposure of interesting. What does a company that's getting their ass kicked look like? I don't even know kind of the challenges that are with that, and then how long does it take to struggle through something before they figure it out. And so picked up a few opportunities, and I loved the chance to see across 3 or 4 early stage startups and what they're doing and how they're figuring out go to market, and then starting to synthesize my learnings from that.
It's a cool vantage point.
It's super cool, and I loved doing it. And it's pivoted since, right? We're coming up on 3 years that I've been doing the consulting specifically, and I've gotten so much better. Thank God for my early customers. I love them. I'm so grateful for them. But man, I sucked. I've gotten a lot better. I'm just figuring out what I enjoy. I think I had this idea of what consulting was and treated it that way, as opposed to now.
So that is an interesting evolution. Is consulting isn't so much like leaning back and dishing out advice. It sounds like you had to learn to get a little bit more hands-on. Is that a lesson maybe to share with folks who want to get into consulting? Is like, what are some general lessons learned about how successful consulting really looks once you've been doing it for a couple of years?
I think there are plenty of people that will show up and be advisors, and I don't know what the actual difference is. So I'll blanket statement what an advisor means. I'm an advisor to companies, so whatever that means. I don't enjoy being an advisor, which means I show up once a week, once a month, once a board meeting, whatever, and give you feedback on what to be doing or thinking about. I think there's plenty of advisors to go around. There's less people of maybe what I would say is actually fractional work, which is what I enjoy doing and what I do best, which is I talk to my clients every single day. I'm in the trenches with them. I'm selling with them in certain aspects of it. I'm literally hiring and building teams with them. And I think that's the difference that I have found that works for me. And don't get me wrong, maybe there's people out there who can show up and do advisory work really well. I work with early stage companies. They need
and the need is not advice. The need is come in and help us build out our first pitch deck. Come in and help us figure out what's wrong with our discovery process, or fill in the blank.
That's right. And that's where ironically, they don't have as much money. They require more hands-on. I'm probably doing the opposite of what the advice is, which is no, go with bigger clients who have deep pockets that I could show up in. But I tried that, and frankly, it doesn't scratch the itch for me, and I didn't want to get burnt out. And I'm playing the long game here, which is ultimately like I want to go write bigger checks into these companies. I want to go invest into them and then help them build. That's interesting to me, and I forever see myself in this early stage game of trying to figure out go to market from 0 to 3 million, and then once it's repeatable and there's systems set up, obviously there's way different challenges, but I'll go hire those people to like take it from 3 to 10 to 20 and 30.
It's such a great way to keep your foot in the game of what's an industry that I have a lot of mixed feelings on, like similar to you. I spent the first decade of my career in tech, and there are elements that I miss. There's a lot of reason why I'm doing what I'm doing today that's not in tech, but it's a great way for you to keep your foot in it, keep a proper distance, keep cash flowing as you were figuring out what was next for you. And ultimately it was an acquisition. So maybe help us get to that point. Did you know that you wanted to go acquire a company?
So at this point, I've been following Cody Sanchez for about 2 years. And I joke, I think Cody Sanchez is the gateway drug to ETA.
Yeah.
I think she does a great job at that.
Yeah, agreed.
But that's about it. Like, not a ton of depth and context, which is fine, though. It works for her. And I had an experience where I've been able to build a following on LinkedIn over the last 12 years of being in tech and just kind of openly sharing things that I've learned. I didn't write for a long time, but my LinkedIn got shut off about about 12 months into consulting. And that's
I remember this actually.
Lead flow. And
what happened?
They have no explanation. I think what LinkedIn is they're mass deleting accounts. And somehow my account got caught up in that. And they had emailed me back and said I had broken their terms of service or whatever. And I don't know if they thought it was bot related. But I went back and forth, and long story short, they'd emailed me 4 or 5 times basically saying, sorry, you're blocked indefinitely. We'll never let you rejoin. I even tried rejoining with other um, uh, emails and like starting from zero. I was just like, okay, I'm screwed. Like my consulting business is like that. The thought of a founder telling another founder, oh, you should talk to Blake about early stage GTM, and them trying to find me on LinkedIn non-existent seemed, how am I supposed to generate business or continue to, it just seemed impossible with my audience. And that threw me into a frenzy at this point where I'd been looking at deals to acquire, but very passively, probably the typical stand back, we'll just see what's out there and maybe never actually do anything. And I realized that I had built this audience, but I actually don't own this audience at all.
Right.
I
Right.
own nothing
Sudden
here.
awakening to that. Yeah.
And like I hadn't been consulting enough where the referral business was flowing, but it wasn't
Not at the rate you needed.
not at the rate I needed it. And at that point, I had looked at this vending deal a couple times, and it was, I think, within 3 months we had closed on the vending deal.
That's so interesting. So you kind of, it helped you get outside of your comfort zone and realized, while this consulting's comfortable, it's working, I may need something a little bit more permanent in terms of cash flow, and it had you look more seriously at a deal.
Yeah, and I had always looked at consulting like, do I want to scale this? Do I actually want to build an agency out of it? And that was not a path I wanted to go down. Even to this day, it's not something that I necessarily want to scale, because it loses what I enjoy about the aspect of doing the work. I love getting in the trenches and doing the work myself. And so I had realized like I need cash flow outside of my brain and the ability to produce revenue outside. I mean, if I died tomorrow, I need an insurance policy outside of my real insurance policy for my family. And vending just kind of made sense. I was really scared to go out and say, I'm going to go buy a $3 million small business and this be my full-time gig. And it seemed like an interesting opportunity to test. Like
The vending machine category is kind of like the classic like car wash category, the Cody Sanchez like hands off. What attracted you to vending? And then in a second, I'm going to ask you like how is it different than you expected? But what attracted you to the idea of a vending route?
I mean, TikTok, like everybody else, probably. And I don't even use TikTok, but like TikTok, Cody Sanchez, and it was probably, I think my top three were vending, car wash, and my dad's done car washes. So yeah, laundromat. And I've been exposed to car washes. Still need a lot of capital to go get a car wash. But my dad's been wildly successful with car washes. That's a whole different story. And so vending was like, I think the deal was 220,000 is what we paid for it.
So is it teeny? How many vending machines do you remember?
I think at the time it was 10 vending machines. Pretty good. They did 130,000 gross.
Wild across 10 vending machines.
Yeah, pretty. What I've come to learn, very high volume locations, and at the end of the day, vending it's a real estate game.
Yeah, it's real estate,
micro real estate game, and we've actually scaled up to about 24 machines in the first 12 months. At one point, we've scaled back down a little bit for efficiency's sake and put some cash back in the business. But it seemed like a low barrier of entry. I had sold a tiny bit of stock from, I can't remember, I think it was Lucid, on a secondary, and thought, okay, this is a chance to go pour the money into here. It can cash flow decently, and to this now, I mean, we're going on 2 years. We have a driver that runs our route for us. My wife runs that business.
But at the time, I remember in your like public announcement, it was like you and your kids running around doing routes on Saturday, which first of all looks incredibly fun, but also very Wild West, right?
Yeah, I mean, definitely was. I mean, I was filling machines every week myself because I had to get in and figure out how the hell to do this, and I was the only person doing it, and it was difficult at the time for my wife to like step in. I figured I need to come learn it, and then I could transfer that, and that probably took 3 or 4 months, and that was brutal.
So give us a sense of give us the 101 on the vending machine business. So how does it work? You see a vending machine, who's typically operating it? What's typical margin? How does it work? What's the behind the scenes of a vending route business?
I'd say most vending machines you see are owned by Coke or a distributor of Coke in the local area. Coke gives them those machines for free. They just have to put Coke products in there, Coke or Pepsi, right? So if they're big, red, and they say Coke, they're usually owned by Coke or a distributor of Coke.
And how are they out securing locations? Because like you mentioned, it's a micro real estate game. It's all about getting an efficient, high volume location.
So they are typically, they're the first people that get in touch and can get in front of potential buyers because it's so easy. You go to Coke, you can request a vending machine. They'll send it to you like that. It's pretty straightforward. Most of my machines sit next to Coke machines. So it's a really fragmented market. And in fact, most of my locations not only sit next to a Coke machine, but they sit next to a competitor in the local area. So I saw a huge opportunity just a consolidation play by better service. A lot of them don't even have credit cards. Our biggest competitor in the Valley here has been around 45 years doing the same thing. They've got over 800 machines, and most of their machines still don't have credit cards. And so it's a simple, when you see on TikTok, that is a simple opportunity. Now, there's complexity within that, right? Not anyone can you can't just go buy a vending machine and throw a credit card reader on it. It doesn't work that way. Turns out most vending machines are really old and they're garbage. You have to upgrade the entire circuit board for it to even process a credit card. And that's another $400 plus another $300 on top of the credit card reader, plus the service to take the credit card transaction. So there's just so much more to it that TikTok doesn't show you. And I've had to learn, right? You can't, yeah. And I have so many friends that have gone out and they bought machines and you're like, sorry, dude, that thing will never take credit card. Actually, it's not built to take credit card. It's a piece of junk, actually. So learning that was there's a lot more complexity to what machines are available, which ones are actually good machines that you even want to buy from, and how old can you go, which we don't really even buy old machines at this point because of that. I don't want to deal with it.
Right. So I want to get back to kind of your insight on kind of opportunity to go and beat the competition. But will you talk me through the economics of a single machine? So what does it cost? How often are you restocking it? What's the margin of the product? Is every vending machine that you have profitable? Just take us through kind of the economics of a single machine.
Yeah, a single machine is going to cost you anywhere from $5,000 to $7,000 upfront. You can typically pick up used ones on local ads. You can get them anywhere from maybe $2,000 to $3,000. I haven't done a ton of that. I do watch them religiously though, because I have picked up some smoking deals on people that know nothing about vending machines. And I just bought about 3 months ago, bought $8,000 vending machines for $1,000, and they're just sitting here. I'll place them eventually, but there's opportunities like that. Gross margin is about 60 to 65% on almost all snacks. About 50% on drinks. Snacks is not the best business. If I could only buy drinks and sell drinks, I would. A lot of my vending machines are combo machines, so you have snacks up top, drinks on the bottom. We are in the process over probably it'll take us 18 months of transitioning to only snack machines and drink machines. So they would sit right next to each other, and you have a drink machine that holds 450 drinks, and you have a snack machine that holds 400 snacks, as opposed to 200 snacks and 120 drinks.
Got it. So efficiency on how often you have to go restock it.
That's right. And there's so much, when I can provide so much more variety on drinks, and there's so much more revenue to be had on drinks. The average snack is $2 or less on the purchase, whereas a drink transaction is about $3.75. It doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're doing a lot of volume in a location.
And so are you having to warehouse an inventory behind the scenes? So because you're ordering wholesale in bulk, you stock these machines, so you're having to kind of carry that burden of all that inventory.
Yeah, that's been a wild learning curve because you start to understand.
Also, one of those things that's probably not on TikTok.
It's definitely not on TikTok. But yeah, chip bags expire within 30 days, no matter who you buy them from, and that's a pain in the ass. And if you're not moving, this is why a lot of people can get into the business, but until you get to about 5 machines with good locations, it's really hard to stock inventory. and to even have any additional inventory sit on the shelf. That means you're ordering every single week, and by that point, you can't order from Vistar or PFG or the big players. You're just going to Sam's Club still and Walmart and buying stuff off the shelf and marking it up, and you're usually doing it every single week. Otherwise, you're going to have stuff that's expiring. It's really hard to get into. So
right, and your high demand items are what make the money, and they're what most often come out of stock.
That's right. That's right. And that's been such a learning curve for us of how do we keep stuff on the shelf? How do we keep it from expiring and slippage on that?
And I guess you're not living in a very data-rich environment where you're pulling reports on top-selling products. You're not getting alerts when something falls out of stock in one of your top locations.
No, the technology. So I will say that was there is technology where we can see real-time inventory. It's horrible technology, but I can at least see. I can see sales by machine. I can see current inventory levels, where everything's at. So that's how we restock and refill. So my wife still does the warehouse. She manages all of that. The kids do help there. I mean, that's we bought it for them. My 11-year-old is like, he's taking it over when he's 15, and he's like dead set.
It's great.
I love it. That's I'm like,
that's great.
If it doesn't make money, I don't care at this point. It does, but like, he's gonna have a kick-ass job when he's 15. He'll run the route. He can do it in one day. So she still pre-kits is what that's called, right? So pull from the shelf, pre-kit the buckets for each location, and then a driver comes and picks it up, and then she drives usually about day and a half full to fill every location, and they're getting filled.
You're doing it that frequently. I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, again, we have pretty high volume locations. Most locations.
Yeah, give us an example, and then talk a little bit about that too, because I'm realizing we skipped the most important part, which is how you get good locations. And is it a revenue share? Are you renting square footage space? How does that work?
Yeah, so I would say most locations out there, if you went to go buy a location off a local classified, it's going to do anywhere from $200 to $300 a month gross revenue. That is not enough for it to make sense. If I have those locations, frankly, I'm selling them off. And there's plenty of people out there who will buy them.
Time to just restock it even once a month, you're losing money.
Yeah, and those, you'll still have to stock them every other week. And by the time you're driving to a location to fill it, it's just not worth it. We average, I think, last time I checked, about $850 a month per location. And I would say that's probably in the top 5%. I
don't even know what to picture. These like universities, hospitals, jails. Like where are these? Where are
so some of our best locations are actually they're rec centers. So you think of kids on Saturdays. In one Saturday we'll do $200 or $300 on a Saturday, between a Friday and Saturday, where kids are going to their games. They walk by it. They beg mom to buy the snack that they have at home, and they pull out and they want to buy from our vending machine. Those work extremely well. Local, like regional airports, we sit next to Coke machines. Hospitals, we have a few hospital systems that we have. I saw a huge opportunity there when we bought the route. We only had one, and we've expanded into 6, I believe, locations throughout that hospital system.
All right, so what are those conversations like? How do you approach them? Do they see it as a convenience and they're just happy you're there? Or do they see it as, no, this is prime real estate for a vending machine. Like, cough up, there's a monthly fee on this.
Yes, I say you have 2 buckets of customers. You have the customer that it's actually a benefit to employees. So they don't, which was hard, coming from tech was hard for me to fathom. They don't buy them like Doritos or something. They don't. That's not norm. So it's a convenience to their existing employees, to which like they just want it stocked every week with the stuff that they want. There's no revenue share at pretty much all those.
You being there is the service.
That's right. Where there are customers, our customers are also their customers, and like passerbys or walk through. We do pay a revenue share, but we've been really fortunate. It's like, I think 5%. I think 10% is kind of the norm in the industry, but we're only paying 5% at some of those of gross. So it's nothing too drastic. I'd say our best locations are actually more forward-thinking call centers. They want to be tech-like companies, but they're also not going to supply all of their employees that they have to like scale up and down very quickly. They're not going to supply all of them with food. So we support them, and those will do anywhere from, they can do $2,000 to $3,000 a month gross revenue.
Wild. And so is it fair to say, Blake, you coming into this, your thesis for acquiring it was, one, this is permanent, this is outside my brain, this is recurring revenue, and I'm going to go sprinkle my sales magic on this and go scale this thing up to 200 vending machines. How hard could it be? Like, what was your thesis coming? Like, what did you learn? Nothing goes according to plan in entrepreneurship. What didn't go to plan for you in your journey acquiring this vending route?
I think that was the initial thought of vending was coming in. Actually, I didn't plan on saying, "Oh, let's take this to 100." It was more. I was much more realistic with this acquisition. It was like, let's just get a deal done and see where it goes. We knew we wanted to hire an operator. Our first operator, we love, good friend. Unfortunately, we turned her over in about 6 months because they ended up moving out of state. But unique circumstance. And then quickly not having an operator and realizing how painful that was. Once you had an operator that was driving,
we went around those routes.
Oh man, and you forget how much time it takes. And anyways, so I think the simplicity of the business seems intriguing, but it's a lot more complex than it actually. I mean, it's taken us. I would say we're just now at the point where we're pretty efficiently operating it. We're almost on 2 years, and it's not easy. It's not. We have scaled into micro markets, which are they're just kiosks where people can go grab food and you check out at the kiosk like you see in the airports, and those are a whole other beast. It's almost a completely different business model, even though stocking it's the same. You know, the idea, the locations are generally the same, but operating those is very different because now we're dabbling in fresh food, and you have inventory and frozen and fresh food, and it's a whole different ball game in understanding margin there, how to stock inventory for that, how to keep inventory on the shelves so you're not running out. How do you transport inventory from the warehouse to the location during the summer without spoilage and not a refrigerated truck? There's a lot to that to think through. That is, I guess if you're doing it full time, but you gotta have a big route to be able to justify doing vending full time.
Well, you're lucky you bought it the size you did. You could have bought smaller. Ideally, maybe you would have bought a little bit bigger, is maybe what I'm hearing you say. But you were able to scale into the size it sounds like you needed. Let's fast forward a little. When did the electronics distribution company?
So I actually found both of these deals at the same time. And it was about, I'd say, 9-month process. It was under the second acquisition we did was about 4 or 5 months after the vending route. And every time I inquired, it was under contract. And I just kept calling the broker. I'd set a recurring event. I'd call once a month. Hey, what's going on with this deal? It was interesting. Did about $1 million gross the year we bought it on a 480 net. One person business. And I thought, that's like right up my alley. It's internet based, right? Like there's, you don't have to hold inventory, end up brokering 95% of the inventory. And it just seemed like a great business. So we ended up closing on that in October of 22, I think it was. That's been a wild ride for
what a year.
That was a big year.
And these are two these are two micro small businesses.
Yes.
They're not $6 million revenue, $500,000 earnings. These are teeny tiny businesses. Very hands-on.
Very hands-on.
Tell us, maybe take 2 minutes and just kind of give us a snapshot of Appleton Electronics. What is the business? How does it work? Why do they exist? Who are their customers?
Yeah, so Appleton's been around 38 years. At one point, the original owner who we bought it from, he'd scaled. It was doing about $15 million a year. He'd scaled a larger team around it. But Appleton, we sell electronic components specifically to OEMs or contract manufacturers that are building electronic products. So we do a lot of work in like aerospace, defense, test and measurement devices, whether we're working with the OEM directly or with their contract manufacturer. And when you think about this industry, they're putting electronic components on circuit boards that are going in whatever the device they're building. Well, the large manufacturers of those electronic components can decide at any moment that they're going to discontinue the production of those parts. And we specialize specifically in obsolete or discontinued parts or parts that just have long lead times. So when you have supply chain issues and issues in manufacturing in China and the lead time is 26 weeks, but you need 1,000 of this component to keep your production line going, you're in a bind and you can't really find it anywhere on the market. So you come to people like us who...
That's interesting.
We end up buying, we have suppliers that are buying from excess inventory from OEMs. So they're, you're manufacturing this device, you bought 10,000 of them, you actually only went through 5,000, now they're just sitting on the shelf. You will resell them to us or our supplier, and then we pick those up and resell them to you.
Wow. And a 38-year business too. So owner was ready to retire. It was kind of your classic story of, ready to sell off into the sunset, needed liquidity in order to retire, needed a buyer like you to come along.
That's right. Perfect. Classic, which is our transition was brutal because of that. And that's a whole other learning experience.
Yeah. What was that first year like at Appleton?
So I'd say the first 6 months I talked to the owner 3 times, and 2 of the 3 times was the first 2 days. We spent about 4 hours together, and it was such an interesting experience because frankly, like, he didn't understand most of the tech he was using. And I was seeing it and learning it for the first time also. And so like, we're literally sitting there talking, and this is the challenges of a one-person business. There was nobody else that had eyes on this. It was just him, and he'd done it for so long. He knew it like the back of his hand. And so him translating what he does, it was over the course of 2 4-hour days. And it was just him pulling up the screen and saying, yeah, I do this, and then I do this, and then I do this, and see, there's an opportunity, and we'll go do this. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, like that seems simple enough. And we had walked through some of that in due diligence, but not like to any depth. And then we transitioned a 38-year-old business in 8 hours.
That's incredible.
Not successfully, I would say, but it was, it was just the reality. We were speaking different languages. So I would ask a question, and it was so hard for him to comprehend what I was asking in terms of just understanding our customers and why they do things. And because it was just, he just knew it like the back of his hand, and it was hard to simplify it.
It's described as like sellers are able to like fly the aircraft blind, and when you're a new pilot, it's like every single instrument on the instrument panel is something you're just overly paying attention to, and it's just mechanical, and you're having to create process around something that the seller can just do practically in their sleep without thinking about it. And that transition is really difficult actually, because they don't even know. It's like that unconscious competence dynamic.
That's it. That's exactly it. And I, again, buying a one-person business, I had nobody else that had eyes on this that could walk me through it. Frankly, I've learned more from competitors in the space and them being open to like sharing how they're doing things and just gaining knowledge than I did from him. And it's not his fault. Like, he was also 60. He was ready to retire. And like, I'm glad for Tom. He's been great. Like, but he just wants to travel now. And so it was really hard to communicate at all.
Risk going into it, but a few months in, were you questioning whether you had made a good decision?
I would say about month 4 was when I started to realize like I was in over my head. And in addition to this, it was very much a side hustle, right? Like I was consulting full time, trying to do this on the side, but like the simplicity of the business is what I thought I bought, because it seems like a straightforward business, right? People need these parts. They just send me the part number I need. I go source it and sell it to them. That doesn't seem hard. There's a lot to that. I'm
realizing you kind of acquired 2 side hustles.
Yes,
I did not
that's
use
right.
that term, and I wouldn't have used that term to describe your businesses. Maybe the vending machine business, but what's your take? Is there a side hustle passive business out there the way that Cody Sanchez's would have you believe? Is your takeaway that things are just much more hands-on and just much harder than you would expect? Or what's your general, you're a couple of years in now, you can look back on those days, hopefully somewhat fondly.
Now, no, maybe not 12 months ago.
What you didn't know then. What are some of your takeaways on this space?
So I think I had this chip on my shoulder to prove that, like, hey, I don't need $5-6 million and to leverage my home to go buy a business like this. I still think that's slightly true. I think the adage of like it takes the same amount of effort to scale a $3 million business as it does a $1 million business, or 800K, whatever the number is true. You just have a hell of a lot less cash flow to to do it with. And cash flow's king, man. Like if I've learned anything in small business, it's hard coming from consulting because I had this lens of consulting, which is just, I just sell my time and I have literally no expenses. I mean, 95% margin. My most expensive thing is $200 a month for a website, you know? And so when all of a sudden you're selling a physical good, which I've never done in my life, that was an eye opening. It sounds so simple. Like maybe, I don't know. I'm oversimplifying. It's like, I didn't even really understand COGS well, right? Like, how do I understand gross margin? And I have, like, nothing starts until my gross margin target is hit. That's it. And that can be different by customer based on how they're buying and, you know, how they source and so on and so forth, which I've learned so much about.
Like a man coming out of a 90% gross profit industry.
That's right. Exactly. In SaaS, like, I've been ruined. Just think, oh, everything's like 85% gross margin. This is great. Like, it's easy to do. And so, yeah, I think, you know, 12 months ago, it was truly like the fetal position moments for me. And I spent 9 months in that and really in this cycle of like, I was stalled for 9 months because I didn't know what to do. I felt lost. I didn't know who else to talk to. I had no one else to talk to. I knew nothing about this industry. I wasn't getting orders. The market had slowed drastically. 4 of our 5 largest customers turned over our buyers. And so I had 0 contacts in those organizations anymore. And they were also not purchasing. I'd lost purchase orders. They'd pushed out purchase orders that were previously committed to. One of them was in medical electronics space, and they just have been hit hard the last couple of years, and production slowed. And I just felt like completely lost. And I'm here paying the debt service on the thing, wondering, how the hell am I supposed to make any money on this, let alone like reinvest any capital to get this thing to a decent spot? And we are in the current state by no means in a great spot. But I tell my wife, I think last year was my year of like figuring out my own stuff and my own life and how to work through that as an entrepreneur. Of like, I almost feel embarrassed to say at 34, I really hadn't had it hard. Like, I thought scaling a company from 1 to 10 million in 1 year was hard. That's a very different hard than buying a business for $1 million and realizing that like your gross revenue is down 70% year over year, and wondering, did I do that? Like, is that me? Is it the market? And by the way, I don't even know anything about this market, let alone the buyers I'm trying to sell to.
Right.
It was a heavy year of learning.
Yeah, I mean, hard times do that to you, right? I mean, hard times, they're like a mirror of reflection on yourself, trying to explore the inner compass of what's driving you forward, why you're even motivated to keep driving it forward. What did you learn about yourself? I mean, I think the silver lining of this is it can be deeply purposeful, and it can be a year of reinvention as an entrepreneur navigating really hard times. What did you learn about yourself?
Yeah. First of all, I started therapy about 16 months ago, and truly I dare say it, like, probably saved my life at moments last year. And I'm a huge proponent. I will always do therapy the rest of my life, because there's just so much to do, so much work to do there. And I think that helped me give me the tools necessary to work through it and recognize I worked through so much shame of the first 12 months of this acquisition, I think, like, this understanding, like, I spent 12 years of my career so successful, and now I just spent like every penny we have of my family on this business, and it failed like that. And it hasn't failed yet, but I don't plan on it failing. But it was like,
sure, it felt like a failure compared to the rocket ships you'd been
1,000%.
It's like, this is harder than I expected. This is taking longer than I expected. The return on brain damage probably didn't look very good. The return on capital probably wasn't good yet. I mean, the term for this phase is the J curve, right? That's the term that's
in the J curve.
and the term almost makes it sound less painful and personal than it really is. It's the fetal position moments. It's the questions that you ask yourself deep at night, like, did I make the worst decision I possibly could have made for my family, for my career, for the capital we put on the line? What got better? What changed?
It was middle of last year, June. We went on a 5-day vacation, and it was the first time in 6, 7, 8 months I'd even like remotely shut off. And we just went to San Diego, took the kids for 5 days, and it was the first time I'd tried to shut off, and I had an emotional breakdown. It was the hardest week of my life because, and my therapist and I worked through it, and he was like, well, yeah, that makes sense, Blake. Like you've blocked all these emotions for 8 months of actually working through it. You never worked through it. It was the first time you allowed your brain and body to say, like, that's right. And so my body's reacting to what I've been kind of holding for 8 months. And it was brutal. And I felt terrible because it's like, oh, I just ruined this vacation. I can't even be here. Like, fetal position on vacation, like sick to my stomach the whole time. And I think like the work of realizing that at the end of the day, there's plenty of people that have gone through this, plenty. In fact, for every story that's successful and probably ETA, there's probably 5 or 10 Correct. That are like mine, right?
And they don't get told.
They don't get told because it's not sexy, it's not cool. And I hope my story's sexy someday. And if it's not, it might not be the story that I turn this around and we scale to 10 million. I don't know. But I've gotten to the point where like that's acceptable and that's okay. And that doesn't reflect on me.
Talk a little bit more about the reframe. So what changed in the way that you were able to reframe what you were going through? It sounds like you were starting on this direction of, well, I'm not the only one who's going through this journey and who's walking this hard path. What else though? Like what changed in the way you were thinking about your situation?
I mean, I took so much of it personally. That it was my fault. I did this. I've ruined this. And I let that stall me from even trying. I had one issue last year where I screwed up a pretty big order, and I think that also kind of led to this spiral event of trusting my judgment on anything, and I think it stalled me from doing anything proactive in the business because I was scared to. And I think I allowed myself the time and freedom to say, like, if this takes 5 years, that's okay. If it takes 5 years to even get it back to the revenue when we bought it, that's okay too. Like, we will get there. And I think having to work through that of, oh no, this only takes 6 months and we'll be on the other side and, on beaches like everyone else on TikTok or something. I don't know. I don't know what I thought and had expectations around.
I'm sure internally, your internal like clock moved a little bit faster because of the fast pace kind of 10 years of your career, 10, 15 years of your career you were coming from, where you can't take that attitude. You can't take this attitude
That's
of,
right.
If it takes us 5 years, it takes us 5 years, and let's figure it out one foot in front of the other. That's not a headspace that works in high growth technology.
That's exactly right. That was not the world I came from. If we didn't triple, quadruple revenue in this year, like that was unacceptable to the board. And to your point, having to reframe and say, if we grow 20% this year, that's a kick-ass year. That's huge in this world. And
in the compounding, slow growth world, that's massive.
That's right. And so I think understanding that, having networks and groups of people that are in this already doing it and starting to learn that.
Yeah.
I think I just had such an unrealistic expectation of what it was like.
Well, so what advice do you find yourself giving as someone comes to you from the tech world saying, I've heard about Cody Sanchez and buying a business, or someone just wanting to kind of found a company and get into entrepreneurship for themselves? What advice do you find yourself giving most often?
Go find more people who have done it and are in year 2, 3, 4 of having done it. Hopefully they're not out of business. And, I think you'll get a real raw story of most people. Listening to podcasts is great, but most podcasts only highlight the cool, sexy stories that are told every day. And that would lead me to building, I couldn't even listen to some podcasts for most of last year because I was so frustrated and just thought everyone's killing it and I just suck. That's probably a big one. I think the other one is just due diligence in a deal. And like, I don't think I'm not an investment banker. I think these guys have seen deals a hell of a lot more than, of course, a hell of a lot more. They spent their whole careers looking at deals. And I am coming in with the eyes of like, I know go-to-market within SaaS. That's actually not very relevant to the go-to-market I'm doing now in this electronics business. And of
And
course,
turns out there's a huge quality landscape in quality of business.
That's right.
And I think that's a lesson you and I both had to learn getting into this space is, you can put your weight and energy and fervor behind any business, but which one is most deserving of that time and energy that you want to put in and capital?
That's right. Yeah, we've allocated a lot of capital, personal capital, to this investment, and therefore I'm committed. We got 10 years to make this work, and I've hired a part-time operator to come help me because I just now have confidence in figuring out this go-to-market motion and what we need to be doing. But to your point, of course I've looked at well, shit, if I just put this capital in the market, I would have made a hell of a lot more. But I've had to rework that in myself and say, no, I did this. I still hold true to the reason I did this was I can build my wealth by doing this correctly. And it might take me 5 years, but I think the ROI will be there. And could have been a lot easier put it in the market, and then hopefully I'd get a better return. But if that's the lesson I learned, I'm going to be damn good at 40 when I do this again.
100%. And I mean, it's kind of in the name. It's almost like maybe you knew some of this getting into it, routine holdings. It's in the routine. It's in the slow compounding. It's not in the moonshot. It's not in the big idea. So sitting where you're at today, what's ahead? What's your outlook for the years ahead? What are you trying to build today? Where are you focused? What are you excited about?
So I'm still consulting. I'd say mostly full time. About 80% of my day is spent consulting. I have a much higher degree of confidence in the go-to-market motion on Appleton Electronics, and I spend the rest of my day on that. I'm ramping an operator to run that. She's spending about 1.5, 2 days a week right now on helping get that motion going. But it's a long play, right? If she's fully ramped by the end of the year, which is so against everything, I'm still doing the work. And, it's like I got 4 weeks to ramp this person that's never done anything in their life into a sales motion. That's gone.
4 years? Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I at least have confidence in knowing enough about what we're doing, who we're selling to, why, how to go acquire new customers. The goal is let's go, we're going to go find 12 net new customers this year. We have a target to grow by 50%. And I think we're there. I mean, we're down 70%. So I feel confident in saying we're at 70% of bookings as we did last year, and it's February 15th. So
that's great.
We're in a great spot.
That's exciting.
There's a lot of work to do, as you well know, and even bridging the next 30% is not easy. So, but I feel good about saying, okay, if it takes us 5 years to get there, we're okay. But it will be spitting off some good cash at that point, and then, then we decide. I think my future would still want to buy small businesses. I think they might look differently, and frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if I bought a SaaS company at some point and something small. But they look differently now.
It'd be fun to watch those two worlds collide.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Blake, dude, well, what I love about your story and what I love about your journey is that you got into the arena. I kind of have this working theory that there's an entry price to get into the game these days, now that interest rates are a little higher and ETA has kind of bubbled in popularity. And I think getting in the game requires you to either take down a deal that maybe isn't perfect and has hair on it, like you did, or maybe paying a premium and having to pay more and take on more debt than you expected, or having to raise more equity and dilute yourself and have investors to come in and acquire, or you have to start, instead of acquire. It's not easy to get into the game. Yeah. You kind of have to claw your way into it, and everyone has their own pathway into the arena, and yours definitely came with some battle scars and and scar tissue that you now have, but now you're in the game and you're cooking, and there's a platform that you can go build on from here.
I appreciate that. I mean, that's literally my next tattoo that's planned, is the man in the arena quote.
Is that right?
Because it's just that's my philosophy is whether you're building an early stage startup, getting in the game is picking up the phone and talking to customers, or you're buying a business. I chose a certain path and to get in the game, and a lot of people I recognize don't ever actually get into the game, and I have a lot of respect for anyone that does,
Well,
regardless
thank
of
you
job.
for not sugarcoating it as you do share publicly. As if you're kind of building in public, it's very tempting to only show the highlight reel because that's what gets rewarded. And it feels good to post the wins, but I think you do a great job. And I appreciate you being willing to have this conversation today as well, because I think it's important to see the underbelly of company building as well. Not because it's not worth it, but because if you have to come in with a level head of knowing what you're getting into. And frankly, it's not for everyone. I think there's some folks where maybe it's best not to jump into this game of high pressure and high stress. And but I think if you can hone that muscle of resilience, there's a lot of fulfillment and opportunity in this space. But there's no getting around that first 1 to 2 years. The J curve is a walloping, no matter how you go about it.
It is. I have come full circle on my thoughts on being a W-2 employee. There's a lot of good things that come from that, and not everyone should go buy a business or start a business. I think I think people should try, but also it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a W-2 the rest of your life also, and that's okay. That's good for a lot of people.
Blake, where can we find you online? Where can we kind of keep following your thoughts and your writings? You have a podcast, you write publicly. Tell us a little bit about where we can hear more from you.
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best spot. I think I'm Blake J. Harber on LinkedIn. I post every single day on there. And probably the second best spot is my blog. I write all this stuff in detail on my blog. It's just blakeharber.substack.com. And you can always email me. I'm always an open book, just me at blakeharber.com. Anyone's happy to email me, and I usually respond. It might take me a few days, but happy to answer questions or feedback or whatever.
And then March 11, you've been gracious enough to join us on stage for a durable event down at Kiln. So we'll get to pick up where we left off here and get into some of the tactics and deeper stories. But March 11th at Kiln, and we'll post the link in the show notes. But Blake, man, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for speaking openly and sharing some of your story. You've got a compelling story, and I think more entrepreneurs need to hear it before they get into the game. So thanks for being open.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chase. Appreciate it.
Okay, see you, Blake.
See ya.